offer to share some of the tips and tricks he's learned over the years. I don't remember, Glenn, when we first met, but it would have been late 80s, maybe somewheres along our trap line.
Yeah.
But at this time you're doing, if you don't mind, just give just a real brief background, Glenn, of what all you've got in your history and what you're up to now, and then we can switch the conversation into what we want to cover today, which is the glufosinate and all things good about it.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. I do know 3/4 of the people on here, but it all started at a 500-watt radio station, and no, it's just kidding. I spent 25 years with Bayer at the time when we were introducing InVigor canola. At the time, it wasn't called InVigor, but I worked on a research farm out of Regina, and then I went on and had a sales territory in Regina North, and then I moved to Saskatoon with Interreg. So spent actually 22 years with Interreg, covering northern Saskatchewan and along the east side down to Val-Marie. So I was in on the earliest development of glufosinate long before anybody had ever heard of it. In fact, doing plots in '88, and then the product wasn't even registered until '95. So we did everything under the sun to see what it did, what it could be. So that, and then there was the development of all the seed varieties at the same time. That was all through Bayer. There used to be, hell, what was Wayne? There used to be 245 people working in Saskatoon developing canola seed. So it was a good time to be there, and it was a great time to see the evolution of glufosinate, because it has changed quite a bit. Even if they don't want to say it, or they do say it, there's been small changes every year. There's small changes in the recipe. So it's interesting. We got on board. We kind of found the recipe that we wanted to use. So now I took I took the golden parachute package, deposited the money, and had a job about 4 hours later with Makdashim Gan out of Israel. And that's was at the time a kind of a leading generic provider in the rest of the world. You know, a small $3 billion company. So had lots of experience there with some pretty acute business guys that wanted to get generics moving. So for 8 years, I tried to push that. I kind of left when they changed their name to Adama and got bought by Syngenta. It no longer became a generic company. It became a generic company that wanted to sell a brand, and it wasn't quite as fun. But also for them, it opened the door because Syngenta allowed them to sell. Before that, Syngenta did not allow them to sell the way they do now. Let's just say an Adama person can go talk to somebody else in another brand company for products. And at the time when we were the generic, they didn't want to talk to us at all. So I went on there. But after when Adama came about, I left and I went to be honest with you, I've been working for the same guy for the last 7 or 8 years, and it's worked out really, really well doing contracts for him. And there's always a little bit of something to do in a contract, whether it's still doing plot work and stuff up in Nipawin at Discover, and still doing, getting products out to China to have them reproduced or back engineered so that we can figure out a way to make a label. Labeling has changed substantially in the last year. We used to do that, and we would develop a label for a Chinese company, and it would have our name on it at the time, and we would sell that product to who we wanted to sell it to. The Chinese aren't doing that anymore. They're developing their own label with their own Chinese address on it, and then they're finding agents to sell it for them. So when you notice that there was all of a sudden 10 glufosinates out there, that's because there was 10 companies in China that decided to make their own label. And that's the thing. A little bit of what I've been fighting, but a little bit, you can't beat them, join them. So right now, that's what I've been doing. I've been, company Yannong is probably right now, it actually might be the second largest glufosinate supplier in the world. They have new facilities and they have new technology. And they wanted to introduce the 280 formulation to Canada, and they also want to introduce the L-glufosinate isomer to Canada as well, which will probably be in 27 or maybe even 28. PMRA is considering it a brand new product, so we've got to start from zero rather than bridge it with all the other products. So I think that the 280 was almost a no-brainer. It's the largest single market in Western Canada for in-crop, and it's a new idea. Rather than 15 guys selling the old 150, I've got an opportunity to sell them something new with a few benefits and price savings. People don't realize kind of price savings. Oh, I see Maverick's already got a question on the L-glufosinate. Yes, I will tell you about that. But I just, so that's what I've been doing the last 4 or 5 years. It may sound funny that I say I'm working in that field, but a lot of you guys worked for FBN before. So the company that I'm working for now is actually the company that supplied the glufosinate to FBN, if you were working for FBN. There was difficulty last year. They didn't sell them glufosinate last year, but you never know, they might be back this year. It's always a case of cash on the table. We'll send the product, and last year that just wasn't in the cards for them. So I was working for this group. What I was doing for the group got purchased by FBN, and so I left in last August. I should have left in April or May, but I hung around and finished my contract, and I basically started the same contract over again, but with the actual Yannong, the glufosinate supplier. So I've been doing that, their goal was to market this 280 product, sell as much 150 as I can, and promote it. Testimonials, demonstrations, research plots, right across everywhere I can go. So I want guys to kind of know what's going on. Doing lots of advertising to make the 280 commonplace, and the rate structure more commonplace. We did some radio, we did some Western producer ads. We've done a lot of digital stuff. So we hired a digital company to AgWow. I don't know if you guys ever heard of them. So they do all my digital stuff. If it pops up on your Facebook or it pops up on your TikTok, they're doing short videos and they're doing advertisements to try to get across what's going on. And over the last 3 or 4 months, we've changed our direction from being a little bit more funny, a little bit more meme, a lot of memes in our stuff. But now it's spring and it's serious, so now it's a little bit more educational. Everything we're talking about is rates and application techniques and what you can do. So you'll see all of our stuff has kind of changed direction just a little bit now because people actually want some information. I answer the 1-800 number in all aspects of the product. So I'm there to be able to sell. I'm their vendor. I'm their vendor dispenser. I answer their emergency contact information from Canutech if there's something goes wrong, and then the agronomy line, which is, what is it, 888-466-0056. So there's not a lot of calls on that just yet because, to be honest with you, most guys know my cell phone number. So just discuss with them about it and try to get the right rate on their farm. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last, especially the last couple of years, to try and, even though I was working for Advantage, which got bought by FBN, the actual, before that, Yannong was really the principle behind all the glufosinate through Advantage. So I was working with them before, and now I've just solidified a contract with them for the next couple of years to promote this product. They also think maybe Brett will just dabble into that. There's quite a bit of there are tons of people right now selling glufosinate in the marketplace, and they're all selling a 150. There isn't a ton of people making it. So without kind of naming names, but you walk into a co-op and they'll tell you outright that they're buying from Lear. Lear is the largest supplier. So, but Lear sells about 70% of their product to BSF, and we sell about 30% of our product to BSF. So they're buying tech. Then BSF is making their own formula here in Canada or in the US, whereas we're getting them to make our formula in China, and it comes complete. A Lear formulation recipe and a Yannong recipe are not the same. So
Question, Glenn?
what's that?
Question?
Sure.
So So this might be random. These big farmers that are selling glufosinate now, et cetera, straight from China, is that what they're talking about? Are they talking about Lear or something different?
I would say, in my experience, that they are, they don't know where they're getting the product. So I'll just give you an example, and I think that it would stand up because of what I see happening in the marketplace. Maybe you bought some Winca glufosinate. So you went and bought it. Winca doesn't make glufosinate, so they have to go to Yannong or Lear to get their product. So a lot of these guys will, even the organizations in Canada, as agents at selling, maybe like yourself, but maybe I would say maybe one step higher. A new farm will go to Lear and get the product. Adama goes to Lear and gets their product because there isn't anybody else to buy it from. In the future, that might change a little bit because there's several places coming online. In fact, Syngenta is one of the people that are coming online with glufosinate, but it's going to take them a couple of years to get their facility up and then to be able to make the product. So most of these guys are going to one of the two companies to get their product from. So Co-op buys from Lear, but a lot of them, who else is out there? Life Sciences, when they want product, they'll phone one of us to fill their orders because they don't make the product. They don't have access to the product except through the big manufacturers. So there's not always a big, it's not well known that there's really only two suppliers of this product in our marketplace with 15 guys selling it. Part of that happened because the Chinese decided to make their own labels. So the Wincas and the Flag Chems and they're all just buying the product from their brother at another factory. And that may sound funny, but all factories are owned by China. It's who's running them. And then so they just walk next door and make the order. So it's a difficult thing right now, is that anybody will get a label, anybody will sell from China, and they'll just access the product in China and send it to the guy. So that's why you see so many people come into the market all of a sudden, because all these companies that didn't make it before decided, hey, we can get a label. The product's old enough. There's no real cost involved the way there used to be. Because if you got to pay data compensation like we did when we started to get in, it can be incredibly expensive to get in, and regulations. So, but we're finding that some of them are getting labels that are not what you suspect. I told Dean the other day, we had a clethodim company that came from China and said, we got a label, do you want to sell it? And it's like really cheap. And we looked at the label and they didn't even have Liberty Link canola on the label. So they've gone and bought a 1995 data comp package for $0, and now they're trying to sell that product. And they kind of wink at you. Well, you can still use it, but you can't. Well, custom applicators sure as heck aren't going to use it, and that type of thing. So there's been no real uptake of those products. So we're seeing that more and more and more. What's going on? What we're seeing right now, Dean, we talked about it yesterday, is that BASF shut down their big plant in Europe because of power requirements. They have to really decide what they're going to build over there, and they're going to build the $60 a liter stuff over there, not the $3 a liter stuff. So they have gone to China to purchase all of their product, or literally all of it, and that's put extreme strain on people like Lear, because they now are providing way more than they can produce. That has caused them to have to go out and try to buy tech to fill all of their contracts. So that's a little bit of an issue right now, because there's no way to tell, but Co-op could be buying Lear through Federated, but Lear is buying it from Yannong to fill the order. But nobody knows. We know it happens because we kind of get, how should I put it? We kind of get credit or acknowledged for the amount of glufosinate we sell in Canada, because that's our contract with. but you don't know exactly where 100% of it went. You just know what your formulated product went. So to get back to, Lear makes a recipe, and they're a little bit newer into the game than we are with their 150, because the 150 isn't made anywhere else in the world for any other market in the world except Canada, and literally Western Canada. And it is probably in the neighborhood of 25 million liters. So people are interested in it. We wanted to move to the 280 formulation, or Yannong did, because why make this formulation for us when it's not sold anywhere in the world? So they pushed us to get this registration, and supplied the money and got everything done. Then we're going to introduce the 280 and try to leave the 150 behind, because you can imagine, freight is 54% more. There's 54% more in a jug. There's the acres. We could make that 25 million acre market into 13 million. So when you're talking freight from Vancouver to Saskatoon, that's 74 cents a liter. All of a sudden it's 43 cents in apples to apples. That's a huge, we're losing deals over 5 cents, and I can change the price by 40 cents. So that's overall, it makes for a fairly good reason to do it, and also not to have a competitor in that market that can compete with you, not on price and not on efficiencies of a 280. So that's what we went and did. Lear makes their 150 with their recipe, and they're fairly new to it. There's been a lot of growing pains in their 150 recipe, probably because you saw what happened to some guys that can't pump, some guys that got water, like consistency of water, because the specific gravity is supposed to be a certain level, wild changes in pH, all those things. They're getting better at it, and they'll get really good at it. Kind of the way Yannong, who has been selling it for the last 5 years. So all of these companies only sell at 280 in the rest of the world. So you're in Montana, or you're in North Dakota, or you're in Minnesota, and you're growing Liberty Link canola, you're using a 280 on it. You're using a 280 on your soybeans and your corn, because that's the only product that's available in the rest of the world. They don't make another formulation. So that will probably be the way a lot of people want to go. You'll notice that UPL registered at 280 this past winter. I'm really trying to find a sample of it, but it's not sold yet in the marketplace, so I can't find a sample of it. If you ever hear of a 280 UPL sample, I would love to get a leader to send to put on our research trials as a comparison. But so that's the kind of the between. We could sell 150 and literally not make. It would be always wrong to say not make any money, but we would literally be in a very, very tight situation all the time, because it's not an incredibly profitable thing at the prices that it's coming in at right now. Not with the US dollar changing, not with some kind of freight going up. You never know how much you're going to pay on freight until the day you buy it, but it's a cost that can change. Just think of for us, clean crop fee. We get $43 a tote. Well, if I can put 54% more in that tote, I can really even save on something as simple as 4.5 cents a liter. So all those little 2, 3, 5 cents is all add up when you're doing it. So the companies, Yannong has a very different recipe than Lear. And I'll walk back a little bit. So when I started, we made glufosinate in 1995 and introduced it, and it literally did not kill a weed in Western Canada. Wayne might remember that. It literally didn't kill a weed in Western Canada. There was an incredible number of, they had the rate structure wrong. They had, I think they had the formulation a little bit off. Not in terms of there was something wrong with it. It evolved over the years, and by say 2005, they had a really good formulation. So what they did every year from about 98 through to about 2011, they added a little bit more surfactant every year. Not very much, because if you add too much, their recipe would change and they'd have to re-register their product, and it would probably be called Liberty 2, which is what every other product in the marketplace that changes their recipe but doesn't want to lose their brand name. That's what they do. There's Brazen 2, there's Bromoxynol 2, there's all kinds of 2s in the marketplace, a Sure 2. So they want to make that recipe a little bit stronger every year by adding more and more and more surfactant. Around 2005, that increase in surfactant started to hurt the crop. Now, so all of a sudden, Liberty had some phyto that it never had before, and by 2010, there was a lot of it. But even from 2005 to 2010, people noticed it, and they marketed it. They called it bronzing. May as well change the worst thing about your product into its best feature. Well, if it's bronzing, you know it's killing everything. So that bronzing is phyto, and that does set your crop back slightly. The higher humidity, the better conditions of spraying, the more bronzing you got. But they didn't really care. But what they wanted to do was they were finally selling canola and Kindersley and Swift Current, where it was drier, where the more you needed it. Otherwise, you weren't going to get any weed control. There was lots of other things that went along at that same time. All of a sudden, clethodim became mandatory. Quinclorac became, until BSF kind of removed it from the marketplace, but it was back on right away after that. And then now that they own it, the Liberty Link system, they sell you faucet as much as they can. All of those things help and have cured the problem. And so bronzing isn't necessarily something you want anymore. So we have a lot of growers. Wayne, I think, we sell to Stewie Barthel up in, he uses our product every year, and he said he uses it just because it doesn't bronze. So the final recipe for Liberty has probably the right amount of surfactants for the drier parts of the country, and the countryside was getting drier. But somebody like Stu in Meadow Lake doesn't want his crop held back for 3 or 4 days. He's fighting a frost deadline every year. So he doesn't want to see that kind of bronzing. So he uses our product to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, what about those guys in the other areas? And they ask you about, does it have enough product in it or surfactant to make the product work? Well, I think actually it does. It's just a very, very tenths of a percent of surfactants. But I think there's just better ways or different ways guys can sell the product to those guys. Clethodim has taken away half of those issues. Quinclorac in the north has taken away an enormous number of those issues. There's just and there's other things that can be added to the product. For example, if you're using Quinclorac with Liberty or a glufosinate, the recommendation is to use merge. I've never actually seen a weed control concern with anybody that ever used merge with Quinclorac. It just makes it work unbelievably well. And you're also getting a wider spectrum of weeds, so you have less trouble. Always use the full amount of surfactant with your clethodim, because we used to use it like 80 and 120 acres, and then you were short 2 jugs of surfactant. But if down now it's 40, it's only costing you $3 an acre. Use it all and do the 40 acres with your clethodim to make the product work better. The other side, the other part of it, which I guess we'll talk to for a few seconds, but what else can I do to make glufosinate work well? And that's, no matter what you do, you have to treat your water. Anybody that has this issue with high mineral content water, like parts per million, over 400, 500 parts per million, if they're having to do something with their glyphosate, they actually have to do something with their glufosinate, because you have exactly the same issues involved. So in some instances, that means AMS to treat that water before you do anything else. It's just a water treatment. So the other one is Crimson is a little bit another option. It's AMS, but we always say it's with special sauce. So they have their own proprietary additives to their AMS. That's one way to make your water work better. Just a question that flashed across here was about pH. Most of these products drive the pH down when they're added to the water to begin with, but everything likes a normal pH. If you're along the South Saskatchewan River and your pH you're sucking out is 8.6, you probably want to do something with that first. The closer you can get to 6.5, 7, the better off everything is. So, but I do want to say that it's treating your water is imperative, because if your glyphosate wasn't working or your clethodim wasn't working, then it's sure not going to work with glufosinate. So that water also changes from the first day of spray season to the last day of spray season. That slough is drying up and mineral content is getting higher and higher and higher as we go on. So if you checked your water in April 30th and then you check your water on June 15th, there's going to be a substantial difference in depending on where you're getting the water from. So runoff water has a different different pH and a different level of mineralization than water that's going through in a river, or even a well. Well might not be change at all during the course of a season. You might be really lucky, your water test will be good. But if you're pulling out of a big slough, it's drying up and it's getting worse and worse as the day goes on. So there's options that way to add an actual adjuvant or surfactant to try and get a little bit better control with a product that, let's just face it, glufosinate is kind of a mediocre product. I told Dean yesterday, the interesting thing about when it came out, it has exactly the same weeds or leaf staging as whole grass, and we got rid of whole grass as fast as we could. That's when your triumphs and 6-leaf staging occurred. Nobody could get out of the whole grass market fast enough. So those are the other thing. The other thing you'll want to do is an early and a late application, which is something that's fairly important. Broadleaf weeds don't germinate at the same time as grassy weeds. So there's that option too of 2 apps. Some farmers will tell you, I've never done 2 apps, and then he'll phone you and say he's got a problem. Then why didn't you do 2 apps? Well, I don't need 2 apps, and then it's obviously it did. So those are the kind of things guys don't think anything of spraying glyphosate or in crop 3 times. And now the products are about the same price, so there's no reason you can't spray it twice, as long as you don't go over the maximum amount that can be sprayed in a season. So those are kind of the things that the other one that I do use, and I've sold several semi-loads of it of late, is Stick and Stay. And Dean and I talked about it a little bit yesterday. I was going to run through 4 or 5 things about Stick and Stay that a guy should know about. Stick and Stay is not an adjuvant, and it is not a surfactant, and it can't be sold that way. It is actually a water treatment, because that's the only way it can be sold. In the US, it is sold under a different name as a surfactant replacement. But in the US, they can do that. In Canada, without a PCP number from PMRA, it can't be sold as a product to go into your chemical. It's a product that goes into your water. So it's a nice little, it's one of the better products actually I've seen, and I harp on it a little bit to growers, but for a cost and for what you're paying for your chem right now, you can make these things work pretty darn good. And I just I think if there was a larger organization that was promoting it across the country, I think it would take off incredibly well. And the reason I say that is that you've got, say, a Winfield and a dealer network that's selling something like Interlock or Masterlock for about the same price, but they have a PCP number. And I think Stick and Stay can actually put both of them to shame, if that, from what I've seen anyways. In the US, they will just take out the surfactant and they'll add Stick and Stay in. Here we have to be just cognizant of the label. If the label says it has to have a surfactant, then we have to have a surfactant. But I have used it a lot with Diquat, where it requires a non-ionic. It does work extremely well. And it has more than one opportunity to help your spray. Whereas, say, an Interlock is a drift control agent. We want something more than, for my $1.50, I want something more than just a drift control. I want several other factors involved. So But I just in talking just to you about glufosinate to get that kind of rolling or out of the road, I see. So we're half an hour in of an hour. So glufosinate, Yanong, who has been selling a 150, who's now trying to do whatever it can to promote the 280. In 3 years, what happens is that in something like a 280, there's actually two products in a 280 and a 150. There's a racemic and an isomeric chemical, so that are mirror images of each other. One controls your weeds and one doesn't do anything. So when you're manufacturing the product, you get these two products, but they're in there, and there's 280 grams per liter or 150 grams per liter of the two products. So in theory, only 75 grams or 140 grams is actually controlling your weeds. They have this other half that they don't know what to do with, but it's in your jug and you get it. This is not unlike a lot of your chemicals. Deltamethrin, for example, is an insecticide, is an isomer, one of 8 isomers that deltamethrin can be. They've isolated it. You can put it down at 5 grams an acre because there's only the active isomer that's involved. So what they want to do is they want to take a glufosinate and only sell you the active isomer. So that would mean that at 150, if they continue to sell you a 150 with only the active isomer, it would be like selling you a 300 today. But a 280 can become a 560 equivalent. It's not going to be a 560, but it's going to be, if only half of the product is actually killing the weeds, and we can make it so you can only sell half, that would be fantastic. That would make our shipments would be 15% of the cost of what it is right now with our 150. So that's what we mean when we say the L isomer, the L glufosinate. That is the isomer that is actually killing your weeds. They're going to manufacture it without the other half. You can't manufacture it without the other half because right now, because it's all done in a factory, and it's what do you call it? I'm trying to think of the right word for that, but it's a process in a factory where things are brought together and there's a reaction and that type of thing. L-glufosinate, to make it without the other half, is actually what they call enzymatic. It's actually digested, and then the digester is separated out from the digestion, and then only the L isomer is there through the digestion. Makes it really interesting manufacturing process, because it's not really a manufacturing process anymore. It's more like your inoculants almost. So because that process is different, PMRA has decided that it's a brand new product. It's not gonna, we're gonna bridge the data to say that it works the same, and all the trials will be against 280 and 150, but PMRA says we have to do a category A submission, which means we have to do everything from start to finish. That would be theoretically impossible without the manufacturer paying the tab. So Lear is on a fight to get there. BSF discusses it fairly openly with growers. They're going to buy their product from Lear, but Yanong built a completely new L isomer factory, and they sell the L isomer exclusively in China right at the moment. So Chinese farmers get the L, and everybody else gets, we get the least efficient product that you can possibly get. We get the 150. So these companies, they want to step it up and reduce the amount of product they're making. Half the product it made is wasted because it's not an active on weeds. So they are really pushing us to get submission has happened. BSF has submitted their L in the last month, and we have submitted ours. So there'll be a race to the finish line. Being first is not necessarily everything that it's made out to be, but being second is very, very beneficial. If BSF promotes the L, and then with $30 million worth of advertising, it'll make the introduction of our L the next day quite a bit easier. They say always it's the second guy in that makes the money, and everybody else just fights it out. So we want to be second. We want to be we thought we were going to be second with the 280 because we were quite convinced that BSF had a package in, and they just have not gone forward with it. They have questioned farmers about it on calls to see what people think about it, but it hasn't gone forward the way it is. UPL has a 280. We just haven't seen them bring it to market yet. Everybody's kind of waiting and I think BSF is probably waiting the same way. We'll make it for 2 more years and then we'll sell them the L and not waste the money on a big 280 campaign. But we think there's enough players out there that we can get the advantage of by not having a one. We'll have a 150 for all the guys that want to use it, but this is the grower. This is exactly the same as glyphosate going from a 360 to a 540. We're 10 or 15 years past that now, and we're still talking. Guys say, "Oh, my 360 used to work so good." Well, there's nothing wrong with that comment. It had it didn't have as strong a salt in it, so yes, it did mix with some things a little bit easier, but there's no way we would be shipping around the 360 with the freight that we've had over the last number of years. Just for guys know, like last April, I think we were down to 1,900 US for a container. The April before in COVID, we were at $21,000 a container US. And when you think that there's 17,000 liters in it, we were talking $1.30, $1.40 per liter in container freight, and then another $1.40 in trucking freight. So if we could cut that in half, glyphosate is exactly the same thing. It economically couldn't happen anymore, and it economically couldn't happen in a warehouse anymore. Nobody could put that much stuff in their warehouse. So it's going to happen. It kind of has good things for everybody, from reducing your size, because loading your tank is quicker. It's storage is smaller. There's more on a spray truck. There's there's all kinds of reasons to store. And as I go back up, we stored at Acropolis in Saskatoon. Well, we can save 46% on our storage costs. We can 46% on our trucking from the coast, 46% less containers when we're bringing in. I think the last year was not a great year for containers, but the year before that we were almost 880 containers at $20,000 a piece. If we could have saved 46% on that, it would have been a miracle. Now things have changed. We were also charging $12 a liter for the product, so the freight didn't seem that bad when you're charging that kind of price, but it's all a percent of what it sells for. So those are the kind of things that this 280 will change. And what we want to do, or what we're kind of promoting now, both on the digital media as well as our advertising, we want to do exactly the same thing Monsanto thought of. And they have a REL and we have a LEL. They have a Roundup equivalent leader, 360 to 540. We have a LEL, a Liberty equivalent leader, and a chart that shows that you can do it with a 280 at this rate, just so that rates don't get too screwed up. There's no confusion. I don't think growers have. You would think after 15 or 20 years, a guy wouldn't have a REL in his mind, because there's guys now spraying 540 that never sprayed a 360, but they're still spraying it in a 1 liter REL instead of 0.667. So we want to have that too, where we spray 54% of what we sprayed with our Liberty, and more importantly, our any 150. So if you can not have to take that extra stuff home, and you don't have to take it out to the field, and you don't have to spend the time. Liberty's a hard thing to pump early in the spring. It gets a little thick, and it's I don't know, a 1,000-liter tote gets brought out of the shed, and it's 5 degrees, and it's a fairly jello-like substance. It takes a lot of pump power to get it pumped out. So, we want guys to have to pump a lot less. And 1,000-liter totes should be warmed up in the sun. They can't be left in the back corner of the shed until the day you need to spray. It's not the best idea in the world. So that's all we're doing. We wanted to talk to growers about this lower use rate. We wanted the time saving it's having. Um, and you as a retail, I'll call your iFarm retail, but if you're having to take something out to a guy, do you want to take a semi-load out or do you want to take half a semi-load out? So that's what we're trying to talk everybody into. If you do have to, as an organization, store 10 and you're paying $27 a month per pallet space, why not store 5? That's already a saving for you. And for me, it's a clean farm fee. It might be the biggest bill I get every year sometimes, just the clean farm bill. So those are the kind of things that we're talking about in terms of why we want to go to a 280 and why we would think about not to be concerned that the 280 is any different than the 150. It's been applied for, licensed by PMRA, and it had to be equal. It didn't have to be better, but it couldn't be worse. So if that makes, it's very, very important that it's equal. All the bridging trials, all the plots across the prairies and 3 different soil zones and all the requirements that the 12 plots per trial in each one is required. We didn't show any worse, and theoretically we can't be better than Liberty because it's the standard. It's what everybody's trying to achieve to be the Liberty in the marketplace. So those kind of things all happened the last number of years. That, I think the first 280 plot I put down for Yanong was in 2018 in NIP1. So we've been kind of going through all the processes since, and now that we've got the registration, we got about, I'd say maybe 60,000 liters on the ground last spring. Some as demo, some as other things. Some guys bought the product. We gave the product away. We had guys that, we wanted to make as many organizations aware of what we had to change from the 150 to the 280 this year. So that leads me to kind of what our 280 and our 150, that in a Liberty formulation, they sell a 200 in the east and on soybeans and corn, and they sell a 150 in the west. There's actually a 150 with soybean, but it's in the east. You don't realize you're walking along and they got a Liberty label, and there's several different PCP numbers depending on where they're selling it. Our goal was they sell Ignite for industrial and burn off and lawn and garden and that type of thing. They also sell a different label for desiccation. There's a Liberty in crop and desiccation label. There's just an in crop. There's just canola. Our 280 by December will have all of those uses. So vineyards in BC to soybeans in Ontario to we're hoping by the fall cereal desiccation in oats and barley and wheat will all be on one label rather than having 5 different products for sale and not having them geographically separated out. There was more money made on 200 in Ontario than there was on the 150 in Western Canada as a whole. It just, they literally was 25% higher gram per gram in Ontario than it was out here. And then you grew soybeans and you have to bring the product in from Ontario, but that was also illegal because it had geographically separated out and the 200 wasn't available here. So those are all the different things that there's just too many things that have that don't need to be this complicated. One product, all the uses, no differential pricing and no differential rates based on your crop and where you live. I think that's kind of key in the future to simplify everything for everybody. It is a brand's prerogative to make things as complicated as possible. Rebates programs, where you can get the product, how you can get the product, all the different uses. So we want to have one. By this fall, we will virtually have one for desiccation, industrial, burn off. And we're also, tell you what, we want to be way ahead in in this burn-off game, because how long will glyphosate be around? Not that there won't always be a use for it and something, but it's slowly going to get its tap turned off, like it has been in desiccation of crops. For buyers won't buy it if it's been desiccated with glyphosate. Slowly, there are country bans right now, and they're also going to slowly turn the tap that'll only have a few uses. So this is a burn off, a different group, and it's a burn off that can be used by just about everybody in most markets. Is it a glyphosate? No, it's not. But we may end up finding out that we have a glufosinate with a couple of additives like heat or something like that that'll make it as good a burn off as anything else on the market. So we want to have that label, and that's 90% of what I was doing this past week, was just trying to find samples, because we were going to have the last of our trials to fill this label up completely. And that's something I won't say other guys are working on that. BSF has certainly worked on that, but they've worked on it to make 5 different products, not one label. So that's where we bridge most of our stuff to each one, to Ignite, to the 150, to Ignite 15. There's a whole bunch of different products depending on where you're sold. The 200, we've already bridged the 200 to our 150 and our 280. So we just want to make sure that we have all the uses that are out there, and maybe even a few more after this. So that's kind of our glufosinate spiel to growers and to retail. But it's kind of this, it's the time saving, it's the low use rates, it's the convenience and logistics for the grower, the retailer, the everybody that has to deal with the product. So
thanks, Glenn. I've got a little is there something else you wanted to touch on before? I have a few questions on glufosinate before we move on to anything else.
Sure. No, go ahead. That's
okay.
That's what we've been up to, and that's what we're trying to promote. So,
well, that's really exciting, and in terms of the time saving and hauling less water around, and one product that fits all, and I think simplicity is your friend when it comes to all that stuff. That's exciting. As you did indicate, you spent some time, so we do have available some, we'll call it cheat sheets, so people can very simply understand how many acres per thing you get and all that. But you touched on a lot of things. One was utilization of clethodim for a graminicide. We've got a number of guys that also, they've been used to using Quizalofop or Elegant or Assure 2. Do you have a take on one versus the other as a tank mix partner?
No, but I think Quizalofop is primarily used in certain geographies more than others. Just as Rosetown would be not use clethodim. Well, they do, but it used to be the Quizalofop. It was the Assure capital of Canada, and part of it was their weed spectrum. And I just trying to think whether it was way back in the day, it was a Japanese brown grass they were trying to control with it. Some guys thought quackgrass control was better with Quizalofop if at the higher rates, because there was quackgrass control, and then there was suppression and control were easily changed by the rate. So yes, we will have. I think we're going to try and find a Quizalofop to sell, because there are grower demand for it, and then it's also has to go into trials, and it has Liberty on it. So we need Quizalofop on our 280 label.
So, but from what you've observed over the years, and no, it's not a recommendation, but relating to clethodim versus Quiz, do you have a differential in your brain, really, on outcome?
I think that no, because I think we were a little bit brainwashed that Bayer had clethodim, and therefore it was the product to use. Because before that we used Fusion. I don't know if you remember that. So it kind of moved up. Clethodim does have a group 1 issue in southern Alberta. High mineral content waters don't work well with clethodim either. So there are guys that are using different concoctions to try and make it work for them in their local area. It always was it was always a hard sell to sell clethodim in southern Alberta, and it was a hard sell to sell from Rosedown to Maple Creek and kind of up to Battleford. It was always that's where the Assure market was. I've delivered a lot of Assure to North Battleford, so I know that there's a lot of demand for it there too. And I think it's just was vast majority of it was weed spectrum. There was things that whether it was just quackgrass control or whether it was Japanese brome, I think it sprayed in a lot of the areas as tricoxidum, which also controlled those products. So my tricoxidum sales started just east of Saskatoon and went down to almost a swift current and then went west. So I think it's the other thing it is who had the best DuPont rep in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Glen Hill was a DuPont or was selling the Assure in Rosetown, and he sold 6 semi-loads of it. And that's and if there was a good DuPont rep, then Assure kind of caught on a little bit. Then you have to get growers that wanted to use it without the registration for the tank mix, but it seems to have grown and grown. And now there's probably 5 or 6 people selling Assure in the marketplace now, or Quiz-Alpha.
Yeah.
So
with the clethodim, there's a in some instances a bit of a minor convenience thing because the amigo or surfactant goes with it in the same case. So there's just one less thing to think about with it too, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, I just honestly think it was sometimes it was dealer driven, and then other places it was dealer driven because of the weed spectrum that was necessary.
Yeah. Second thing was kind of the northern tier right across Saskatchewan for sure. Like there's the cleaver component, and you mentioned quinclorac or faucets and that. In terms of the guys that need to put that in as a tank mix partner, what all is that beyond cleavers? What else is it going to heat up on, and what would you suggest would be the best thing to go with it? Like for example, I've got guys that actually they'll do the clethodim and they'll throw in the quinclorac and they'll also do the glufosinate all in one pass, and all things being equal, it works great. But what would be your take on that?
Totally unsubstantiated fact. I'll just put it this way. There are a number. So if you got a registration on quinclorac and you wanted to sell it and you wanted to put all the information on a brochure, really PMRA wants you to have 80+% control, more likely 85, and they want to say that's acceptable control and farmers should be happy, and they're not always happy. They like 99. I know that, but there's an enormous number of small weeds that never made that list. 20, 30, 40, 50% control. Now, is that going to cause an issue farther down with resistance? But it just seems that when it's mixed with Liberty or glufosinate or 280, that 40 plus whatever glufosinate does that maybe not was perfect becomes perfect. Mm-hmm. And those are the kind of weeds that we're looking. I'm trying to think in the Battleford area, 2 years ago, almost every guy in the whole Battleford area had trouble with it. But if he had an opportunity to use something that could knock it back, and the Liberty and the glufosinate could knock it dead, that's part of the different things that quinclorac can do. There would be nobody, I think, who would say that, but there's obviously some synergies involved in some weeds that aren't 100% controlled or even 50% controlled, that once you add it with the glufosinate, you are starting to get pretty decent results of a bunch of different weeds. Quinclorac is still you're using it for cleavers, and
Mhm.
that's what you're using it for. Repeatedly, or resistant cleavers to other options out there. So I think that's what you're using it for. There's no problem using clethodim, quinclorac, and glufosinate in the same tank mix. There's no problems using all the adjuvant of the clethodim. That option is left open kind of with the quinclorac. Use surfactant not necessarily required when used with other products that have a surfactant in them. But I will say that it's recommended to use merge, and holy cow, does it work. Whatever the merge does, whatever it heats up, it's not like I go out there and I see bronzing after you've done it. It's just, it heats it up from a kind of a different perspective. Bronzing is more of a very specific thing that happens across the north. But I don't think there's no reason. There's guys on the call from, if you're in Tisdale and you bought quinclorac, you got merged with it, and at no time have we ever seen a complaint in the Tisdale area.
Mm-hmm.
The dealer has it under control. He hands you the merge. The problem is the merge is expensive. That's the biggest problem with it. But
Mm-hmm.
so then that's the kind of that's kind of the hottest, greatest mix you could possibly ever have with glufosinate. Those two together.
Yeah, Koch has been one of the bigger bears in our area, like that's spreading pretty good.
Well, yeah, and there's literally, because of resistance, I'm pretty sure that when I go see a field that has Koch in it with glufosinate, whether it's in Weyburn or down across the southern U.S. or near the U.S. border, I think it's the shape of the plant, it's the shape of the leaf, it's the we have no idea how old it is, that plant. So if we say it's controlled up to 8 centimeters, that's it's really hard to tell me whether that plant is 10 weeks old or 2 weeks old, because generally where Koch is a big problem, it's dry and it hasn't grown until it gets that nice big taproot going down. So it's kind of hard to say to a guy who, I did a pre-burn on no problem. Well, you did a pre-burn 5 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, and that plant was big enough to be then. So is that plant 10 weeks old? You're probably not going to kill a 10-week-old kochia plant or a 12-week-old kochia plant. You need that little tiny kochia plant, and that's not going to happen. So I think when we see it, we usually see a field that got burned off with Roundup, and the Roundup needed an additive in the worst possible way to try and control that kochia. It gets just run out of control. And I don't think your glufosinate is ever going to take it out. It will take out all the little ones, but it won't take anything else out. That's just something to live with if you're in that kochia country.
One last question on the glufosinate from my side, unless anybody else has something before we move into your next topic. That I know we're pushed up to the hour in a little bit, so if anybody needs to bounce, this is just helpful info, so I'm going to keep going if that's okay, because we got Glen. But you have to leave. I'm recording this anyway. But is every glufosinate? Most guys are using the 150. Are they all created equal? What I mean by that is you've got two main suppliers of the 150 product, and there's all kinds of different stickers put on there. The active is one important piece of the puzzle, but as is the cost though of the surfactant loads and all that stuff. And so what makes a guy understand, I know you have to be a little bit careful, but some guys shop on price. Some guys, they get it for $4 instead of $4.50 a liter or whatever. Well, is there some other questions they should be asking a retail to make sure they're getting what they hope they're getting? Or would they even be aware of that?
Well, there's two problems with the question about how to be answered is that everybody's recipe is patented and secret.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you one way or the other, but I can tell you that they're not the same. So for the guys that are on here, let's go back and talk about glyphosate for a second. If you push the Chinese for a better price, they won't always do it, but if they're going to lose the deal, they'll do it. And what you'll see is you might only get 50% of your surfactant and you have no idea. So that is a trouble. They can always meet your price expectation, but not with the same product. So let's just say that over the years, the surfactant load has been about $1 of your cost. Well, if you want your product 50% cheap, 50 cents cheaper, there's probably only half the product in it. I would say it's probably easier to go by price, what the best product is, than it is by anything else, because they will just make the product so that they can afford to sell it to you at the price. And I think that's fairly fair. There's no real way. I guess I get that question all the time. What is exactly your surfactant load? Well, if that was the case, we may as well just advertise our formula and let anybody build it. And we've had years and years of developing that formula. Do we know what the surfactant load is? I think that it's safe to say on the glufosinate, we are a few percentage points lower, and we know they are, than actual Liberty, because we don't want the burn. We have always thought that we would rather deal with a small issue of weed control than we would with hurting somebody's crop. The expensive complaints are when you kill the guy's crop. So we know that Lear's formula is different than ours, and we know their formula is different than BSF. They're under a lot more pressure because they're the main supplier of BSF. They cannot have a duplicate formula to BSF. So they have changed theirs just slightly to not match BSF's. We don't have that obligation, but Yonong has their 150 formula, and we've just basically had 6 or 7 years of experience with the 150 to know not to do this or not to do that. Yeah, it's very hard to. The only reason we would know what Liberty has for surfactant is to back engineer it by and saying that this is the percent that's this. One of the issues that we always see, and I think that everybody kind of understands that most products, not the Liberties or the glufosinates, but most stuff is dissolved in Esosol 2000 that's here as I'll just fake name or trade name or whatever, but the Chinese can back engineer it, and they know they need to add Esosol 2000, but they make it. So it's just a little bit chemically, it should be all exactly the same, but is it Esosol 2000 that they dissolve the glyphosate in? No. It's when we get it manufactured, they are manufacturing their generic Esosol 2000. Everything should be exactly the same. So when we ask for a product, we send them an actual recipe. We send them exactly what we want. It gets tested before it leaves the factory. By the factory, we have a guy in China that works for us that takes a sample from the container, and he sends us the samples. So we have retained samples in Canada of the stuff that came off. So we kind of know what we have ordered. And I think that we've also stayed with some pretty key. Yonong is a glufosinate supplier. They're pretty key because they're the only other one in the world. But in the glyphosates and stuff, as long as you are dealing with the more reputable people, and as long as we have a guy that can walk into the factory at any given time and check to make sure the recipe is being followed, that's what we want. So we have a guy. We have James. He's he lives in Wuhan, and he goes out every day and he checks manufacturing for us. And I get, honestly, he takes photos of the container number and the container load and the way it's strapped in and the cushioning around all the pallets. So when it actually gets loaded on the ship, I have a picture of the inside of the container. So damage that happens after that's then the shipper's responsibility. So they want it to leave China in 100% shape.
Mm-hmm.
So we see those guys, we see their pictures, and we know exactly what's going on. So it works out pretty good having somebody over there. If you don't have somebody over there, or you are buying from maybe less reputable, reputable might not be the right thing, but we certainly know who delivers on time. We know who delivers a quality product on time. We know who we've had trouble with. We know who makes a really, really nice product. So we've kind of narrowed it down to the guys that we're dealing with. So, and then Yannong is a super backer. They know how to make glufosinate. They just do. They're making tens of thousands of tons of tech, and they know how to make our 150 and our 280, and they'll soon be making our L. So they built a brand new facility during COVID. They built a brand new facility just to make glufosinate and specifically to make the L glufosinate.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's we just want to make sure that we're dealing with people that we can trust them. So we have
That's just not worth the hassle, man. Yeah, totally. And the cost to the farmer is not that huge of a spread from a premium to a cheapest one, right? So,
when glyphosate is this cheap right now, use more in it. You won't notice a surfactant difference, or treat your water. Do what you need to do to make have a good spray operation. But there is that difference for between people. There's kind of being recorded here, but there's kind of three people that you buy from in China. You have the true government owned operations, and then you have true businesses over there that have the government has given the manufacturing facility to somebody to operate efficiently and effectively. And they're very rich people because they've been given stuff by the communist government. And then we kind of say the third one, for no lack of a better term, is the mafia. They run a certain portion of it. We had that experience 12 years ago, and that's the boss is never buying again. Mm-hmm. So, there are people in our industry that have to buy from them because they have no other alternative anymore. They burnt their bridges with some of the other ones, so they have to buy kind of on the dark side, and we're not going to be doing that. We know who they are, so we want to stay with. To be honest with you, there's Winca and Fua, and they're the two big shots. And you kind of want to be in. Good Harvest is they make a beautiful product. We're just not as interested in dealing with them because we need somebody that can do volume and get things rolling. And can you imagine how many containers that Winca and Fua are buying every year to ship product? They're talking of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of containers. So when we need 5 containers, those guys have 5 sitting around. We don't need to worry about that. Same with totes. They literally have the tote manufacturing place right in the middle of the factory because they're going through tens of thousands of totes a week. Mm-hmm. So we want to deal with somebody that can respond to what we need and still make us the product that with our recipe. Mm-hmm. So that does become part of an issue with everybody.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for that. Before we move on from the glufosinate, anybody have something in their head that they wanted to ask a question about? And,
I do, if nobody else does.
Go ahead, Brett.
Can I summarize what you just said, and you can tell me if I heard it right, Glenn?
Yep.
People say the products are different. They all come from China. And did you just say that you can't reproduce BASF's recipe? So it all comes from the same place, but it's a different recipe. Is that what you said, kind of thing?
Yeah, it's tech. So all the Lear and Yannong make tech for BASF.
Okay.
And then BASF has their own confidential recipe. Yeah. Everybody kind of does. Now, everybody wants to reproduce their recipe because they've got 30 years of experience with it. But, you back engineer their product. But if you had back engineered it 20 years ago, it's going to be slightly different than if you back engineered it this year.
Right.
Because they've slowly, well, everybody's modified a little bit of their stuff. You know what happens, Brett, is that they want to find a different supplier, or the supplier for one of the surfactants goes broke, and they probably have 2 or 3 in the back pocket that they can interchange out and back and forth. So even theirs is not necessarily identical from year to year, but it's those components that who are they buying the component from the cheapest? They might have 3 people that can bid on the component part of it.
Okay.
Regina is not importing their surfactants from China. They're actually importing them from Singapore, Malaysia, because it's made out of palm oil. So, it's palm oil that's going to our stuff in China from Malaysia, or it's palm oil being sent, the component that they make out of palm oil that comes from Malaysia. And then there's surfactants that come from Chicago, and then so they have people that they can bid against each other. So they're never going to be up against the wall and stop production because some company went out of business. A force majeure that stopped their production. They always have the backup guys. So the backup guys should all be identical, but it's just the same way as I told you, the SOSOL 2000 that Bayer uses or BSF uses in Regina, there's an identical component made by some Chinese industrial company. So there's no difference that way. So those things should all be pretty much exactly the same, but there is going to be a slight recipe difference because everybody patents their recipe.
I guess last comment. So if $4 or $3.70, I've heard, if it's down that low, wouldn't they be tempted to start chinsing on surfactant or something? Is what I'm getting at. Right?
I can tell
so
you
they can make a buck. So they can make a buck, right?
We're all kind of worried about competition, but I don't really know if there's competition in China. Somebody will tell people in the organizations in China, because they're actually all owned by the same. They're all owned by the government. So there is quite a push to increase that price, but they've kind of extremely hurt themselves because they have had they've been keeping people at work, and they've been massively producing, and now they've got every corner of the globe full, and they still want to. I've heard talk that they're 8 months ahead in their production. Somebody's going to have a great season to get it down to what it was regularly, where there's 1 or 2 months of production stored. So I've heard that. So for a lot of guys that don't realize that, even Bayer, their Roundup components come from China, from these same guys. So quite often, Winca will tell us that the Bayer product's going up 19% or it's going down 7%, because they'll have changed the component prices to them. Now it takes a while for it to flow through the system, but that they might get hurt by these Chinese tariffs because these components are coming in. They might not get hurt because the actual production is occurring in the U.S. And there's already a tariff on it for the U.S., depending on how you qualify your import. Is it pre-made? Is it component? Is it for this other market than agriculture? So there's already issues like that. I think that we might actually be better off if the U.S. gets grumpy and taxes the living shit out of these imports, because we won't have those unless our government decides. And they haven't talked about tariffing China anytime soon. So, and they know it would affect agriculture first. So I think they're probably worried about that. But yeah, from a perspective of what everybody's making, trying to make everything the same, but all that fine tuning comes at the expense of being in the business for a while. It's just evolution of how things go. And some people have had, Bears had 35 years of fine tuning, and we've had 12, and Lear's had 3. So I think that that's a big part of what you get. I'm absolutely sure they will all be equal at some point in time in the future. So we got to move to 280 and we got to move to the L long before they start doing it, just to stay one step ahead.
Mhm. Well, that's a fantastic discussion there. Thank you, Glenn, and good questions, guys. Can we just switch gears briefly? You had mentioned earlier, Glenn, on optimization of the glufosinate in crop. There's various iterations that people use, like in our area. You get into a Shellbrook zone, LI 700 goes in the tank with most stuff with glyphosate, and people are looking at on the glue side of things. You mentioned Merge, you mentioned Crimson or AMS products, and you've also got the Stick and Stay product as well. And when a guy is looking at canola being what carries the farm for revenue, trying to chintz on saving a buck on this or that is maybe a false narrative in terms of what is best. But what would be your, just tell us what your take is and what your experience has brought you to and what you think on all of that stuff.
Well, it is necessary. I'll just say that the surfactant business in Canada has, it's been introduced kind of, in the US, it was far more surfactant knowledge was out there because the branded companies were required to take the surfactant out of their product and sell it to you separately. Partially, I don't know if it was EPA, but it partially registration of these products is that if you don't need as much, you don't use as much, let's separate them out and the grower can use what he wants. The big push was the branded companies wanted to sell you the surfactant, but the retails that carried these products wanted to sell their own surfactant because surfactant business is gravy money for these guys. So things like Clethodim didn't come with exact, they sell an unloaded glyphosate. So the retail could then sell their company ones, Loveland surfactants or Winfield surfactants. So these surfactants are 45 plus years old and there's never been any technology advancement. They absolutely have a place, but it's really dependent on the structure of the plant that's getting sprayed. And maybe the time has come to rethink surfactant usage. We're going to get a nice flat film on top of everything. Well, it also runs off if it's the wrong kind of leaf. Are we ever going to get the back of the leaf sprayed without it dripping off? No. So there are certain weeds that weed control is worse by using a surfactant. And there's certain weed control that are way better with a surfactant. So, and then there's the ionic component of the surfactant for a lot of things so that product doesn't get repelled when it's going on the leaf. So you've got a whole bunch of different things going on there. One of the other things is that the U.S. is much more aware of drift and surfactants because of dicamba use in the U.S. So they are super vigilant about what they do. So all what we had this, we were introducing glufosinate. We know that we would like to be able to have a guy who has a drier, tougher go have product that he could use. We didn't want to register a product and spend $800,000, which is, if you were lucky enough and you registered your LI 700 35 years ago, you spent $3,000 and now you're spending $80,000 worth of trials for 3 years, and you'd have to do every single product in the marketplace to make it under the new tank mix regulations. So we got approached by a company in Florida that sold something that was completely the opposite. Everything you ever thought about surfactants is exactly the opposite way that they're trying to sell. Hasn't made their life easy, but it has made their guys that catch on after. I'll honestly say this: some guys don't catch on until the third or fourth training session, and then all of a sudden the light clicks on. So partly is that because you can't have a PCP number because they're not gonna pay for that. They're required to be called a utility modifier. And I don't think people need to be scared of the terminology. That just gets you around the PCP number. So we're not treating the chemical, we're going to treat the water. If you treat the water, these fairly spectacular things will happen. So if I can treat the water and take care of drift control and other things like that. So I'll give you an example of Stick and Stay. It's literally an organic product and can be bought with the organic certification for certain uses. I don't know if you've heard there's that organic graminicide that's out. This would lower the rate that could be sprayed from that graminicide, that organic graminicide, by about 75%. So it becomes very flexible and price usable. They also do the same thing with an insecticide. They have an organic insecticide that this incredibly elevates its effectiveness. So we've got, sorry, I've had a cough since Christmas and I can't get rid of it. And the more I talk, the worse it gets. But so they have a product that I'm just trying to think of the right name for it. What do they call it? It's a humectant. It's used universally in the food business. So if you ever get a croissant that looks like it's wet on top, but it's glazy, that's Stick and Stay. So they use it to stick the almonds on top of your croissant. They use it to stick the peanuts on it. It's used in every bottle of Coca-Cola in the United States as one of its modifying the water so that there doesn't get to be an oily residue on the top of the Coke. It's used at Starbucks uses it. It's used in all baking goods. So they thought to themselves they wanted to get into a different market. They ran into a agricultural guy. I think his last name's Tannenbaum, and we've talked to him a couple of times. And he said, "This is awesome." He said, "We've got a product that will keep the product liquid on the leaf. We've got a product that makes the droplet size almost perfect." And he said it reshapes the droplet. Every adjuvant wants to spread out. We don't want it to spread out. We make really tall droplets that stick on the bottom of the leaf, on the top of the leaf, on the stem, everywhere. And that droplet stays wet anywhere from 2 to 4 times longer than a regular droplet. And then if you have a surfactant added, it gets flat and it dries out almost immediately. So that's one of their things they always do in their presentations. They always spray paper on the boardroom table with the 2 products, and one's dry in 5 seconds and the other one is wet when we leave the meeting. So if you can imagine, that has a lot longer time to be absorbed in by the product into the plant. If it's an insecticide, it stays wet and the insects walk through it and die, because insecticides generally are all contact. So in a pyrethroid or a lambda-cy, it makes a 90% application of contact killing to 100%. And they have all the trials on their website, so it's easy to look at. In the US, the product is called Accomplice. So if you can have drift control that's better than interlock, and you can have that humectant effect, and you can have it stay on the leaf longer, and if you can have wash off protection because it's actually a sticker. So that's just something that a guy could that has those opportunities. So, if you can have the right kind of droplets and you can not have the drift. So an example of that is I've got 2 guys now, one guy at Cold Lake and one guy in Eston. They added it to their dicot application, and one guy said, his dad said, "It's funny, when I turn into the slightly into the breeze at the end, I used to always get a little bit on the windshield, and I'd be worried that I was covering the sprayer in spray." He said, "When I added this, I have to get out and make sure that the sprayer was still spraying, because it just goes straight down, and there isn't those fine drops that are blowing away, and there isn't huge drops. So it works very, very well that way, and that adhesive property of those droplets will stay on those plants for quite a bit longer. So what we're really doing is we're treating the water, and that is you have to be aware that you're treating the water. So that means treating the water before you ever get to the spray field. Because of the product, you can throw it in your truck on the way to the spray field. Like you could throw it in the water tank. And that's what they want you to do. In North Battleford, their Evolve Ag, they have a 1,000-gallon tank on the back of their truck that they blow their water through before it goes into the sprayer, and they add all of their stick and stay in that tank so that the water is treated. You can't treat water that's already had the chemical in it. So that's maybe the only downside, but it's actually not much of a downside for the what you get. So if you're going to spray $2 for interlock and you're going to spray $2 or spend $2 on stick and stay, you're going to get that same drift control. You're going to get the added benefit of that humectant process of being wet on the leaf. Even like a fungicide, can you imagine being wet on the leaf for 4 times as long? That's how much more is going to be absorbed into the plant. So I took all of the regular products in Western Canada that we normally use. I took about 20 different varieties of canola, wheat, barley, oats, and we put them through spray wind tunnels, and to see, we went up to 10x rates and did not find any phyto. So we're very much convinced and have data to show that we don't have phyto, even up to an overspray or even a 10x rate. There's literally nothing you could do that would. We just want you to do a 0.125% V per V, and in a real bad situation, maybe a 0.25 V per V. But just to give you those benefits of wash off in the morning if you're spraying, evaporation protection, a deposition aid for the size and formation of the droplet, and the drift control. So I think it gives off a really nice package for the same value that you're doing everything else with. And I will say that most guys don't really understand that something like LA700 as an ionic surfactant, they say, oh, I can do it for $1. Well, they actually can't, because the actual rate for that to be used as that surfactant, it's closer to $3.50 and $4. Not guys are adding LA700 just for the fact to say they did it. Yeah, it's got a non-ionic in it. It's not being used as a surfactant at the rate that it's going in the tank. So I've seen lots of guys run around saying I only spend 80 cents, but you're spending 80 cents on nothing instead of spending $2 on something that works quite well. And I think there's decent money to be made. There's 16, 18, 20% margins that can be made in this. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but when a guy deals with a Winfield retail, his interlock probably just shows up and he's told to use it. That's the kind of promotional existence we need with stick and stay. We need it just to be sent. Like I was out at Winnie's one day and he said, what do you think this stuff is for? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they just send it with it. They tell me I have to use it. And he does. So, they have great grower control, and that's how it's promoted. But, you can't use interlock at high speeds because it breaks down. It doesn't have the ability to keep a droplet at high speeds. Can't be used by an airplane, can't be, so it has its drawbacks. The average sprayer going out, yeah, it stops drift, but don't you want several other things at the same time? So how these things work is important, and how they stick is important. And I think value for money, you're getting good value for your money. I see
question there.
Three Hills has his hand up. I never realized that was down in the corner. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
No, it's good. I just wanted to know, if you use stick and stay, do you still need to add AMS if your water's got minerals and salty? You still need to add the AMS and then the stick and stay.
I would fire in the stick and stay into the fresh water and then treat your water with AMS.
Okay, so first the stick and stay and then the AMS.
Yeah. The most important thing is stick and stay goes into fresh water, and then it becomes, they call it a matrix, but then it is actually dissolved in your water, and then you have the opportunity to see the results of it. If it goes in afterwards, it doesn't really go into the water. Once there's a what would you call it? Once you have a xylene carrier in the water, it doesn't want to. It's not going to go into the water, not the way you want it to go in. So then it kind of it's sitting in your tank, but it's not doing anything.
Okay,
so
thank you.
That's why we say to guys, throw it in your tank long before you even get to the field, and that's where you'll start to notice the differences. Right. We do know that. We have had guys say to us, didn't do a thing. Oh, when did you add it? Well, I threw it in the chem handler when I was leaving. That's not going to work.
Okay, thank you.
Just a real quick comment. I was looking online at humectants, and it's all about food. So it gives you an idea how safe it is. They're talking about putting it with food. So yeah.
Every baking company. So in the U.S., it's they are an offspring of a very, very, very large baking company, baking components. So that's where this stuff came from. So it's kind of neat that I don't know if the organic business will ever get big enough for any of us to make any money at it, but their organic graminicide and their organic insecticide, they actually work. Like, it's quite amazing that one of them is some kind of an acid, and then the other one, it actually uses the matrix of the stick and stay in the water to trap the insect, and then it dies. I don't know if it dies from the other component or it suffocates to death, but it's sticky enough. It's like a sticky mousetrap. This stuff does that kind of a job on the insect. So there's a lot of people in the vegetation or vegetable business that are really, really interested in being able to say, I put an organic insecticide on vineyards, and they're all excited about it too. I just don't live it.
We could use one too, right? In ag, we could use a couple of new insecticides.
Oh God, yeah. A couple of them, they are working on it, but we might end up having to come down to using some of these organic products. Mm-hmm. Or, what we really need? We need Lumiderm and Fortenza to become $4 an acre instead of $24 an acre. And then we would replace a lot of the other products that are going out there. I see pyrethroids, they've found resistance to them in Saskatchewan and southern Alberta. So, we've got problems with flea beetles, and we're going to have trouble with diamondback moss soon. And lambda-ci has already been trimmed a little bit for its use pattern. It's all good and bad and ugly. It's we're going to have some trouble. We're going to have to figure out a way to do this. So if I was spraying an insecticide, there isn't a way I would spray an insecticide if it didn't have stick and stay in it now, or a fungicide. And here I am, I'm trying to get you to use it in glufosinate, but it actually has two way better uses. This staying wet on the plant is vital. So all you're really doing is you're mimicking humidity. And where do products work the best? They work under high humidity conditions and sunshine. And if you can have them both, or you can manufacture those conditions, then you're going to have the Swift Current guy can have the same results as the Meadow Lake guy. Because chemicals they seldom don't work in Meadow Lake. Mm-hmm. They have the humidity, they have the sunshine, they have the growing conditions, and that's moisture and humidity. So we want to kind of mimic that as much as we can in all other applications.
So on that stick and stay part of things, is there any instances like, do you view it as a Frank's sauce? You put that shit on everything type of thing? Like, is there instances it would not be appropriate?
Where you're adding, it absolutely counters a surfactant. So if you're adding a a surfactant like merge, then what you would be doing is you'd be neutralizing the merge and the stick and stay at the same time. Now in the US, they will use stick and stay instead of exact and clethodim. They use it for as the non-ionic in diquat. But up here, our labels say if it requires a surfactant, then it's probably not a wise. Or if you really want to use it, use the minimum amount of surfactant required on the label, and then have the stick and stay in the water. So yeah, where you have a product that has a surfactant requirement additive, I think that the IMIs are one. Sulfonylureas, there's usually a surfactant required, generally in 99% of the formulations, but everything else. So then the question always comes up is, what about the surfactant that's in the product itself? Well, that there is probably a surfactant in every single product, but you'd be surprised how little of it there is. So they've kind of balanced the amount you need to kind of unbalance that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if you were adding a surfactant, then you probably want to back away from it a little bit.
Okay.
GR Jeff there, I think he's probably onto something a little bit, but if I can, kochia application is a leaf dimensions wrong for the product. I think that it's 100% for the kochia, because you're now going to stick on everything. You're going to stick on the back side, the top side, and the stem. Whereas with I'm going to burn it off with some surfactant, it's going to go on and run right off. So I think it's an opportunity to maybe that's where you go from 0.125 to 0.25 with your glyphosate to try to get a better control of it with the products you're using.
That answer your question there proper, Jeff?
What do we call it? GUR?
I'm assuming. Yeah, it's just Jeff.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But I think that's important. Anything with a surfactant, you will not get anything on the underside of the leaves, because it'll drop off, and you'll not get anything in the veins of the leaf, because it'll all run to it's designed to spread out. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and it's just going to run off. So that's a bit of a problem.
Great. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time. We've went over a little bit, but it's all very good information. Just spent a half an hour just on the surfactant side of things. So before I let anybody go, is there any questions not been covered off? If you do have something after the fact, you can hit me up, and I'm more than happy to pass things along to Glen as well. But I wanted to thank you, Glen, for taking the time today, man. That was really, really helpful. Hearing some things that hadn't really been brought forward before, or hearing it in a different way, it's always good stuff. And I really am thankful that you found the time this morning, man.
Oh, that's no problem. I just I've got another one at 11:15. How do you like that?
Look at that. Yeah, you've got time.